is Dr. Bonds-Raacke, and I am the chair of the psychology department here at Fort Hays State University. I know that throughout the semester in this course with Kathy, you guys have been given the opportunity to hear about different areas of psychology. My training is in experimental cognitive psychology, and Dr. Park will be speaking with you, if she hasn't already, about what sort of courses a cognitive psychologist takes and what career opportunities are available for cognitive psychologists. Today, though, I would like to take this time to talk with you guys about graduate school in psychology, because there are some unique things about going to graduate school in the field of psych that I think it's very important for psychology students to know from the first day. Even if you're thinking at this point that you're not interested in graduate school, it's still helpful to know about it because your plans might change in the future, and this way you have a heads up about what you'll be expected to have in terms of experiences if you decide to apply to graduate school. So the first thing that I want to mention about graduate school in psychology is that it's very different in terms of the competitiveness compared to getting into an undergrad institution. There are competitive undergrad institutions, and certainly Fort Hays, as an example, has specific requirements that you have to meet to get into the undergraduate programs. But graduate school is even more competitive. And for example, the rates in terms of people applying to graduate school and being accepted in the field of psychology are more competitive than doctoral programs, MD programs. So it's really important that psychology majors know what they need to do so that they are competitive in terms of that application process. Again, going back to this sort of comparison of how getting into a graduate program is similar and different than an undergrad program. Typically for undergraduate admissions, it's not even the case where a department reviews your file. You know, that's handled all through the university admissions unit. However, for graduate programs, faculty within a given department review all of the applicants, and so that's handled within the specific department. There are certain things that programs are looking for. One way to know of the list I'm about to give you which factors are most important to specific schools is to buy a book that comes out by the American Psychological Association. It's called APA Schools and Graduate Studies. You can buy it on the APA website, www.apa.org, or you can just Google it, Graduate Studies in Psychology and APA, and it'll come up. It's not very expensive, maybe $25. This book is updated every year. The information contained in the book comes directly from the universities themselves, the psychology departments. And what psychology departments do is they report to APA on the factors that are important to them in terms of people that they select for graduate school. And it'll also give you statistics like this specific university had so many applicants and they accepted this many. This specific university offers this amount of funding, and this is how many students per year receive funding. So that book will be very helpful in terms of picking schools that are looking for applicants that match your credentials. The book is also really easy to navigate too because it has an index where it breaks the schools down by types of programs. So if you're thinking, ooh, I really want to do clinical psychology, it'll have a list of all the APA schools in clinical psych. Or if you're thinking, I really want to do cognitive, there'll be a list by that particular program that you're interested in, so you don't have to search page after page looking for the program that you're wanting to apply to. Okay, so things that are important when you apply to graduate school. The first thing is your GPA. Not only your overall GPA, but in particular your GPA in psychology. Most graduate programs are going to be looking for at least a 3.0 overall and at least a 3.0 overall in psychology. What I mean by at least a 3.0 is some programs receive so many applicants that they have somebody in the front office actually go through the applications, and if you don't meet the minimum requirements, they take you out of the pile. In general, a 3.0 is a minimum requirement. This is where the APA book comes in handy though, because they'll tell you the average GPA for the participants they accepted the year before. Not participants, but students that they accepted. For PhD programs, it's more common that people are going to have a 3.6 to a 3.8 GPA. For master's programs, even a 3.3 to a 3.5. So keep in mind, even though 3.0 is the minimum, I certainly encourage you to have a stronger GPA, because the stronger your GPA, the more competitive you will be in those programs. The next thing that graduate programs look for is your GRE score. The GRE is similar to a standardized test maybe that you took to get into Fort Hays, to the ACT or the SAT. The GRE is produced by ETS, and so if you do a Google search and type in E, capital T, capital S, you'll go to the ETS website. It'll give you information on the GRE. It will give you practice questions. You can sign up for the GRE. It is an expensive test to take. I think the most recent I heard was $150 to $160. In terms of GRE scores, some schools have specific requirements, and so if you really have your heart set on a certain school, you'll want to be sure that you know what they require. The test is broken down into verbal, quantitative, and analytical, and so schools might have specific requirements for each of those portions, and you'll want to be sure that you have the score that you need. Other schools will say they don't have a minimum requirement, but this is where it becomes important to see what scores the average student who's accepted has, so that way you'll know if you're a competitive applicant for that program. If you are not a good test taker, I wouldn't say that you need to worry or become overly anxious, but if you're not a good standardized test taker or feel like you're not, it will be important that you prepare for that exam. If you're in bigger cities, there's Kaplan and Sullivan and places like that. They offer courses for the GRE. There is a price to pay, but normally people report that those courses do help prepare them. If you're not anywhere near a big city that has those centers, or you're just not interested in that, you can go online and just purchase study guide books that you can use at home to help you prepare. And I think that's important because the GRE is not testing your material over psychology. It's not testing even maybe your knowledge of things that you would have learned in your math courses from our department, because you'll take statistics and things like that from us. The GRE is testing your verbal abilities and some of your basic math abilities up to geometry and things like that. And so maybe it's been a while since you've looked at that material and you just want to refresh yourself, because you probably knew it at one point, but if you haven't looked at it in a while, it's good to become familiar with it again. A lot of students worry about the GRE scores, and so I would tell you, don't worry about it, but be smart. Do take the time to become educated on the types of questions and some test strategies. And an important piece of advice is that every school will be different on what GRE scores that they use. For example, some schools will only take the GRE scores from the very first time that you take the test. Other schools will let you take the test multiple times and they'll take your highest scores. Other schools will, allow you to take it multiple times, but will average all your attempts to get one score. So you want to be informed about the schools that you're applying to, and if you take the GRE multiple times, you'll want to know which score that school is going to use. And I think that's also important to know because, sometimes I hear students say, well, I wasn't even planning on taking the SAT or ACT, and I just woke up and did it and I didn't study for it. And while that might have worked at that time, I really want to encourage you to rethink that for the GRE, because if you're applying to schools where they only take your first score or your first attempt, and that happened to be one that you didn't prepare for, you don't want that to knock you out of the ball game even before you have a chance to get started. So we've talked about GPA being important, GRE being important. Again, most of the time schools have cutoffs. There's somebody in the main office that sorts files, and it is kind of unfortunate, but if you don't meet those cutoffs, then your application won't even be forwarded onto the faculty or for the next level of review. And that's why I wanted to stress that, grad schools are very competitive in psych, and it does involve multiple levels of review. So, let's say that you have a good GPA and you have good GRE scores. then what else are graduate schools looking for? Something else to mention in terms of, if you have a good GPA and you have good GRE scores, a lot of people have really good GPAs and a lot of people score well on the GRE. So those two things alone are not going to make you stand out as a competitive applicant. That will make you one of many. You'll have met the cutoff, but those aren't, the bells and whistles that those programs are looking for. One of the key things that graduate programs look for are really strong letters of recommendation. These letters of recommendation should come from faculty members or professionals in the field that you've interacted with. They should not come from a close family friend or a high school teacher from 5+ years ago, or even from a pastor. They really need to be professional references. And it's key that those references are strong references, that they're not a faculty member who says, yes, I had Jane in class in fall of 2010 and she earned an A. You're really going to want to stand out from all the other applicants. And so carefully choose and select the people that you ask to write letters for you. Be sure that they've had you in multiple classes, that you've done well in those classes, and you feel like that faculty member, not only knows your academic ability, but knows your integrity, your motivation, your honesty, because those are going to be characteristics that letter writers are asked to comment on. I always recommend to students that when you ask someone to be a letter writer, that you're upfront and say, do you feel like you can write me a strong letter of reference? And they might respond and say, I've only had you for one class, and while I can comment positively on those limited interactions, it might be in your best interest to ask someone who knows you better. And so really listen to that and try to find someone who has had the types and the number of interactions that will lead to those strong letters of recommendation. Something to be thinking about, most schools require 2 to 3 letters of recommendation. So as you're taking courses in the program or selecting opportunities to work with faculty members on projects, be thinking about, is this an individual who in the future I might want to ask for a letter of recommendation, and be sure that you're putting your best foot forward and you're demonstrating those desirable characteristics that the faculty member will be asked to comment on if they are a letter writer for you. You will also want to give letter writers ample notice. It's very unprofessional to say, hey, I'm applying for graduate school and my application is due next week. Can you write me a letter? I recommend that students give at least 4 to 6 weeks, and that's after the faculty member has even agreed to write the letter. And that's a 4 to 6 week window where you give them all their information. So if someone's writing a letter of recommendation for you, you need to give them information on, here's the programs that I'm applying to, here's my career goals and why I've selected those programs. Here's my cumulative GPA, here's my GPA in psych, here's my GRE scores, here's a list of the courses I've had with you and the grade I received in each. You have to really prepare faculty members so that they can write the best letter for you. You don't want them to write a canned letter. That's the same for every school. You want faculty members to be able to tailor their letters of recommendation so that schools are very clear that you're a good match for their program. And so providing that information to faculty members puts them in a position where they can really provide you with the strongest letter possible. Service is also important for graduate schools. They do look for service. I would encourage you though to look in that APA book, because graduate schools place different levels of emphasis on service. So certain clinical programs or counseling programs are going to place more of an emphasis on service than say an experimental or a social or a cognitive program would. I would generally recommend that it's always good to have some level of service, but be aware that if you have to pick between service and research, that research experiences are very valued. And so I've saved that for one of the last things that I want to talk about, because graduate programs really look for undergraduate applicants who have had the opportunity to become involved with research experiences at the undergraduate level. Now, we require our psych majors to take Psych 250, which has to do with statistics for behavioral sciences, and Psych 259, which is experimental lab. And so those are 2 courses, 8 credit hours, that are a nice beginning to a base in research. But again, that's not going to make you stand out, because every applicant that's coming from a psych program will have been required to take stats and an experimental lab or research methods course. So what you're really looking for are additional research opportunities. Now, our on-campus students have the opportunity to do that because faculty members within the department have research labs. We all have research agendas. For example, my research looks at Facebook and the impact that social media has on individuals, whether that's in an academic setting or maybe, for example, our recent line of research looks at how people use Facebook with the grieving process, and does it help people grieve or hinder their rate of recovery in terms of getting over the loss of a loved one. So faculty members have these research agendas, and we will invite undergraduates who have done very well in the classroom setting to participate in that. Sometimes they participate by contributing to our current research projects. Other times they do their own independent studies. This results in students being able to go to psychological conferences to present their research, and sometimes even getting their research published. I think it would be really helpful if you could take the time to look at different conferences that are available, even if you're not going to present, but to at least attend one conference. Regionally, within the state of Kansas, we have PERC every year. PERC is in late October, early November. It's an undergraduate only conference, so it's undergraduates throughout the state of Kansas and Nebraska every other year, and they come together and they just share the research that they're doing. And every spring is Great Plains, and that is, you know, the surrounding area. Now, any of our virtual students could attend that. You don't have to only live in these states, and if you've been working on a project, you could also submit and fly in and attend those conferences. If you want to see what professional conferences are like, there's different regional conferences. There's SWAPA, which is the Southwestern Psychological Association. There is SEPA, the Southeastern Psychological Association. There's the Rocky Mountain Psychological Association. And so again, just depending on where you're located, there's probably going to be a regional conference within 5 or 6 hours every spring. They have sessions at those regional conferences just for undergraduates, where they'll talk about getting involved with research and how do you get into graduate school. And then there's also professional presentations, so you can have an opportunity to see about some of the latest research going on in the field. Then there's 2 national conferences every year. There's APAs, which is typically in August, and there's APS. And APS typically has their national conference at the end of May. So those are some opportunities you might want to look into and see if it's possible if you could attend. Maybe it happens to be in your hometown, and that would definitely be something you would want to take advantage of. If you are a virtual student and you've completed 250 and 259 and you're thinking, hey, I know I want to go to graduate school and I should become involved in research, my recommendation to you would be to approach a faculty member that you've had a class with and talk to them. See if they are working on a research project, and maybe it's possible that from a distance you could help them with that. You also might want to check out the Journal of Psychological Inquiry. This is a journal just for undergraduate students. As we're filming today, it's a journal that is housed out of Morningside College, but in August it will move to Fort Hays State, so it's a journal that will be managed by myself and Dr. Raacke. So if you'd like some information about a project that you've worked on in class that you can extend, or maybe you want to do a project with the purpose of submitting it to that journal in the future, you know, that would be something that I would encourage you to do. The journal is reviewed by professionals, so if you submit something, you're going to get reviews from multiple faculty members. You know, you'll be asked to improve the quality of your work, and it is something to be proud of if you're able to, in the end, increase the quality and get it to the level where it's worthy of publication. What I would ask you guys to do at this point, I know it's overwhelming to learn about graduate school, especially if you didn't have some of this information before, is just reflect on the information that I've provided you. Maybe generate a list of questions and you can share those with Kathy. Many of those questions Kathy can answer, but if not, she can forward them on to me, or you can contact me directly. My information is on the psych web page, and I'd be happy to talk with you one-on-one about, you know, the specific area of psych that you're interested, and maybe the things that you need to be doing so that you are the most qualified candidate for the graduate program that you're looking for. So thanks so much today, and best of luck in your future academic endeavors.